I really tried to lean into why I'm different. I tried to use humor, like mention that they're probably getting like a bunch of emails, and if they're going to open one, here's a couple reasons why it should be this one. I found that some of my best connections were not because I went super deep into their vertical, but because I could get on a call and connect the problems that they were having in building out a go-to-market or scaling out a product to problems that we had in past companies, and could maybe offer some thoughts on how they could scale faster, how they could think about their team structure.
Search Party is sponsored by Avid Bank, Boulay, Mayer Brown, Plexus Capital, and Oberle. The lead sponsor is Next Coast Legacy. Hello and welcome to Search Party. I'm David Snow, your host. And today we're joined by Curt Black. He is the CEO of Aproove Work Management. Curt is an entrepreneur through acquisition, and he's based in Costa Mesa, California. Curt, welcome to Search Party. Thanks for talking to me today.
Thanks for having me. It's an honor to be here. I've enjoyed following the podcast over the last year and excited to be a part of it.
Excellent. Well, what we're going to learn about is your ETA journey up until the present moment, at least in the world of long-term investment. It's kind of breaking news. You acquired Aproove in January of 2025. Can you just give us a real quick elevator pitch about what Aproove does?
So Aproove is a horizontal software company. We focus on work management for high compliance use cases. And basically what that means is that you can plan and execute projects in verticals where you might have sensitive project assets. We've started to build modules that allow us to both plan, do the work, and then actually do the compliance and approval chain of the work all within our software.
Well, let's go all the way back in history to your personal development. Curt Black, where are you from? How did you grow up and how did you get the enthusiasm for business?
So I grew up far from Costa Mesa, California. I grew up in Davidson, North Carolina, home of the Wildcats. A lot of people know us only because Steph Curry went to college there, but it's actually a little college town just north of Charlotte. It was like a small college town surrounded by a bunch of farms. Frankly, like business wasn't really a focus of anyone where I grew up in Davidson. Like going to business school wasn't really a common thing, like among my family, friends, or people that I grew up with. I kind of fell into it through mentors. I realized when I got to USC that there were a lot of other paths out there. I think a lot of my journey was driven by my job in college. I was a tour guide, and at USC, it's a pretty competitive job. You have to go through a rigorous interview process. I think there were like a 1 or 2% acceptance rate. It's a year of training, and then you're able to go and represent the school's brand. And I found that I got a lot of energy out of spending time with people, representing kind of a complex set of products. I realized that those skills might translate better to business than to me continuing to do research or go to med school or something like that. I had a mentor at school who back in 2011 went to join Google on a marketing team. He put me in touch with the Bold internship program at Google. It's their small business focused internship program. There's not that many people that go through it. And I was super lucky to get an internship. And that was really my entrance to the business world in a full-time capacity.
Let's talk about Google, which is a very large company, but you learned about smaller businesses at Google. What gave you an appetite to continue your professional life in small businesses?
I interned there and then was there for just under 9 years total. So I was there for a long time. I spent 2 years in our small to medium business sales organization. And my first job was literally like wearing a headset, like cold calling advertisers. Not at all how I imagined starting my career, but it was one of the best jobs that I had because it taught me the resilience of being told no. It taught me how to learn, the breadth of a very wide product set and be able to translate it to a bunch of different vertical use cases because we were a horizontal team. And it taught me to be competitive. We keep track of revenue metrics, how many calls people were making. And I sure as hell wanted to see myself at the top of that leaderboard. And for a couple of years I was, and I took pride in that. That was a big part of my brand at work.
When was it that you became aware of what entrepreneurship through acquisition was? And what was your initial reaction when you discovered this career path?
Oh man, that is a good question. So I was at a startup called Actify with a good friend of mine from Google named Chase Rigby. We had explored working together a few times. We both went through like the literature of ETA, like everyone does around the same time, like read Buy Then Build, read the HBR guide to buying a small business. And we were kind of talking to each other and thinking, if things don't go exactly right here, maybe we try to go buy a small company. I didn't go to business school, so I wasn't really aware of the support system around ETA. And frankly, that took a little bit longer for me to find. Chase and I were very lucky to meet the team at Peterson Partners, and they were really my first trusted partner in the ETA ecosystem. And at the time, my wife was in residency, and there were a lot of reasons why, outside of just funding, like the mentorship and why I thought the traditional route was a good fit for me. Started to realize, okay, I need some help here. I need some support. When I decided to raise a fund, I was looking for a few things on my cap table. I wanted a strong lead and a few people who could help bring the resources to my search. Obviously, Peterson offers that. Next Coast was a huge asset in my search as well. Definitely had a thesis that I wanted to find a way to stay in software if I could. So I wanted people who had expertise and experience in software. Next Coast, I think, brought a lot of that thought leadership to my search, a lot of pattern recognition. They also have obviously a venture fund, so they see trends in software, maybe in a deeper way than others. I really valued that. Dustin went to USC, so there was definitely a connection there too. Anthony Walker's on my board, and I'm super honored to have him on my board. I think he's brought a lot of rigor to how we benchmark ourselves against other software companies in their portfolio, and was also a really great thought partner in my search around what I should like about certain companies, how to think about different verticals. Very honored to have them. They've been awesome.
In building your cap table and meeting with investors, did you ever experience regret that you didn't have an MBA? How did these investors understand your experience? And do you feel that that was a little bit of a disadvantage to not have that background?
To be honest, no one really pushed me on it. And I actually believe that me having a different background than others, it's not better or worse, but I do think it's very beneficial to stand out in how you present yourself to business owners. Granted, if you have an MBA, there's plenty of ways to do that too. But I think maybe it was a little bit easier for me to do that because I was coming from a very different place. I brought management experience to the table as well. My last role was as a chief revenue officer, which I think was helpful. So in talking to business owners, especially in software companies, I felt I was able to connect. But I also maybe missed some of the skills that people with MBAs would bring to the table around finding a good deal, recognizing a good deal, being able to build out a fast operating model. Like I had known weaknesses, and I was very transparent that my cap table selection was intended to fill those weaknesses.
Let's take a quick break to learn about a partner for growth in the lower middle market, Plexus Capital. Every Plexus Capital investment begins with a foundation of trust. The team approaches all partnerships through the lens of its CARE values, grounding principles that guide the team's decision-making. Care about our people. Always do what's right. Respect each other and our partners. Expect excellence. Plexus Capital has been providing debt and equity capital to lower middle market businesses since 2005 and began partnering with the search community in 2010. Since inception, the firm has deployed over $2.4 billion into over 190 small businesses. Given the team's expertise and track record, you could say Plexus Capital has large firm capabilities with a small deal focus. Look for commentary from Plexus Capital professionals in episodes of Search Party. Okay, now back to the episode. So when you structured your search, this was a traditional 2-year search, right? Your investors backed your living expenses essentially.
Yep, I did a traditional 2-year search. I was lucky to find a great cap table and honestly got great guidance from the raising stage all the way through closing and now operating.
So you were looking for SaaS businesses. What was the size range you were looking for?
I was looking for businesses where I thought I had an edge with my past experience. It became clear to me early on that, if you're going to win a good deal, I think it's important that you have a reason why you are the one to win that deal. So I started to think early on about my search more along the lines of where do I have a right to win? And my answer to that was always, one, probably a software company, because I've spent most of my career there. And so my thesis was always, if I could find a good product and a good team and probably a founder who was more technically oriented, who was trying to ramp up their market or find their market or pour gasoline on a growing product, I could be the right person to lead that company moving forward. I was lucky to find a company that very much did fit that thesis. We have a great product. My seller is a technical founder. He's staying on as our CTO. They've never had any go-to-market hires, sales or marketing. I'm very lucky and honored to be able to put this thesis to the test, and I'm starting to have fun doing it.
So talk about the search. You were trying to meet founders and business owners of largely SaaS businesses. How do you find those people? Do you just email them? Do you knock on their door? What do you do?
I was doing a whole mixture of things. I was using a lot of the tools that I'm sure many searchers use. I had a database called Grata that I was using to filter for certain size ranges. To directly answer your question, I was looking at, companies anywhere from like 2 million in revenue up to probably 6 or 7. I also developed some interesting kind of channels of, I guess you could call them like river guides of people who worked in different areas of technology who could introduce me to business owners who might be looking to exit. One of those channels was a friend of mine who went through Y Combinator and positioned me as an educational source to help founders who had gone through a seed round and maybe had been in a growing stage get education about what their exit options could be. I was mostly emailing founders and found that was still a viable way to do outreach, but over time it definitely became harder. And there's a lot of reasons for that, email filtering, and you definitely do have to have a mix of ways of reaching out.
What would the first sentence of your email to a SaaS company founder say?
It would be 4 reasons why we're different. I really tried to lean into why I'm different. I tried to use humor, like mention that they're probably getting like a bunch of emails, and if they're going to open one, here's a couple of reasons why it should be this one. I found that some of my best connections were not because I went super deep into their vertical, but because I could get on a call and connect to the problems that they were having in building out a go-to-market or scaling out a product to problems that we had in past companies, and could maybe offer some thoughts on how they could scale faster, how they could think about their team structure.
One often hears a description of the entrepreneurship-through-acquisition community as being baby boomers that are facing retirement, maybe someone who's 70 years old who founded an HVAC business in the 1980s. That's probably not the kind of people that you were in touch with when you were looking for small SaaS businesses. So what did these entrepreneurs and founders tend to be like? What was their sort of stage of life, and what was their mentality when they met you?
You actually make a really important point. I think there's maybe a conception, which can be true, that most of these sellers are really looking to retire because they have to retire. In my search experience, the best sellers that I encountered were not as old as you might think, mid to late 50s. And they had been running their company for something like, 10 to 15 years. If you started a software company back in 2012, for example, you've been through a mobile revolution, you've been through a SaaS revolution, and you're about to go into what might be an AI revolution. And so I think to be able to lead through multiple waves of change in software takes a certain type of leader. And the sellers that I would find were open maybe to leading through the next growth wave of their company, but they also recognize that with the right leadership, maybe the company could accelerate. And also maybe they could be a part of that journey. I think there's a lot of sellers like that where maybe they aren't at retirement age, but they're maybe ready to pass the torch to the right person.
What was the journey to meeting the seller? How'd you get along? And were there any bumps in the road on your way to the close?
I met the seller originally in November of 2023, and we ended up closing the deal in January of 2025. So it was a long road. It's hard to project how long these processes might take, especially with sellers who aren't entirely motivated by money. If you're not money motivated and you're not at retirement age, maybe time isn't the most important factor. So our deal was not straightforward. The original company is in Belgium, and 75% of our revenue, our customers are here in the United States. Our seller, who's our founder and chief technology officer today, was also in Belgium, where he lives with his family. We were close to closing in June of 2024, and the seller at the time put things on pause and called off the deal. Had very legitimate reasons for doing so. A confluence of things happened. So we decided mutually to walk away, and I think we both handled that really professionally, kept a good relationship. A couple months later, he sent me a note and we got back together, and we both decided that there's a great fit here. There's a great fit for the future of the company. It was the right time for him to step into a product role. And he was excited about spending more time with our engineering team in Belgium rather than focusing on our client management, our growth. So it boomeranged back around and we closed in January. But I can tell you it was a mental roller coaster for me. I'm sure it was for him too. Super honored that we were able to get the deal done, that was able to keep my investors with me the whole time. And obviously thankful to Xavier, who's our seller, that he decided to trust me and our investors with the future of the company. And also thankful that we kept a very respectful relationship throughout and didn't try to, force the issue when the deal broke down. I think that's actually a big reason why the deal got done, is that I think it's important to maybe give the seller the space that they need to confront such a big decision.
On a human level, how did you feel with the clock ticking towards the 2-year mark and a deal that had fallen apart? What was your state of mind?
Not great, not great. It is a tough, wake up in the morning on a Sunday and, all of a sudden the deal that is going to close in a week is off. I definitely forced myself to get back on the horse, and I had a great network of relationships that I'd built through the search community. I was able to kind of tap back into some of that credibility and resurrect other deals that we were looking at. Coincidentally, right around when I felt like I was in the driver's seat again is when our deal ended up boomeranging. So I'm happy that we were able to get it done, because I think it is uniquely a fit for what I had previously done in my career.
One really interesting aspect about the current, setup for the company is that you are the CEO, but the former CEO and founder is now the CTO. A lot of times in these ETA deals, the founder is out and the CEO becomes the new leader. And the reason for that is a lot of people worry that there's going to be sort of clashing visions if the founder remains in the business with sort of the new leadership. So how were you able to have the confidence that that wasn't going to be the case, that you guys would be working in harmony, even with a change in roles?
Yeah. I mean, I think that was a really sensitive thing for both of us. You can imagine for Xavier, whose company, he's the founder, he's now the CTO. I think for him, he knew he wanted leadership to grow the company in the US, but I also think he wanted to work with someone who understood the product vision and respected the product, saw the potential opportunity. I wanted to work with someone who had a great instinct for product. And whether they stayed on or not, I wanted to have a relationship with that person, whether it be in a consulting role or board role. The way that we both got comfortable with it is the first time around, Xavier came to the US and we spent 2 weeks together for like 2 full weeks. First in my office here in Newport Beach, and then a week in Peterson's office in Utah. But it was more about how they thought about people, how they thought about product, how they thought about strategy, how I thought about those 3 things to make sure that we had alignment. And then the second time around, I went to Belgium and I spent a week and a half in Belgium on the ground with him and met some members of the team. I think between those 3 weeks, if you're spending 3 weeks with anyone, all day, every day, and then dinner, you get a feel for how you work, how you think. And I think we both left those trips appreciating what each other could add to the equation. I feel like we're in a really interesting working relationship where I get the benefit of history and the benefit of engineering expertise while still being able to really start to push the pedal on go to market and start to steer the product in a direction with him that matches our market opportunity, which is what I'm excited about too.
Final question, Curt. You are now 5 months into your leadership of Aproove Work Management. I know it's a big question and we need a short answer, but what are the top steps that you're going to take to add value to this business, to change its operations, to position it for a thriving future?
We have a horizontal and deep product that can serve a lot of different use cases. We work with Kroger and we work with Los Alamos National Labs, and we work with a lot of companies in between with different degrees of project volume, project assets, and compliance needs. So I think our first step is identifying where we win within those verticals, picking out a handful and taking a narrow view of where we can compete and where we should win. And then step 2, which can be kind of parallel path with step 1, is starting to build out the infrastructure to tell our story in the market. And if you really boil that down, it's like, let's build a go-to-market team, because I think we have a good story to tell, and we've told it through customers who find our website organically, historically. And that's exciting. I'm excited about being a great manager to them and supporting them and growing our team while our revenue and our company grows too.
Excellent. I do have actually one more question for you, then I'll let you go, which is, when you run into a young professional who's thinking about the ETA path and they ask you, what do you think I should do? What do you say?
That's a good question. I think it is an awesome path, but I underestimated how challenging it can be in some of the weeks maybe where you don't have deal pipeline, where you're going out and trying to find companies that you're excited about, or maybe when you've gone through a thesis that you thought was great and it wasn't the right one. Like, there's a lot of lows in ETA that you need to have the grit to push through. And I thought it would be hard, and it might have maybe been even harder than I thought it was going to be. So I think you should really make sure you want to do it. I think you need to have a very crystal clear view on why you're different, and what companies you can add value to and why. I think that's the only reason that my deal ultimately got done, is I think maybe without knowing it, my career had a great answer to that question. And I just happened to have worked on problems that were identical to the problems that our company that I've now inherited are dealing with, and the opportunities that we're dealing with. So find good partners. That's an important piece of advice that I'll always give to you, and know what you want from your partners. But if you do those things, there's good companies out there.
Excellent. Well, Curt Black, CEO of Aproove Work Management, ETA searcher turned CEO. Thank you so much for talking to Search Party today. Thank you for sharing your story, and I hope we can have you back as you hit new milestones of success with your investment.
Happy to. Thanks so much for the time.
Search Party is sponsored by Avid Bank, Boulay, Mayer Brown, Plexus Capital, and Oberle. The lead sponsor is Next Coast Legacy.